Welcome to On Demand Module 4, Teaching Success with REACH, Grades 3 through 5. This is one of 6 on-demand modules to help you get started using National Geographic REACH. My name is Rosalind Wall, National Education Consultant for National Geographic Learning, and I will be your presenter for this session. National Geographic REACH is a core ESL program that delivers integrated instruction in language, literacy, and content for ELL in grades K through 5. REACH is aligned with national and state curriculum standards for ESL/ELD, English Language Arts, Science, and Social Studies, including the Common Core standards. As I said before, this is one of 6 on-demand training modules to help prepare you to use REACH in your classroom. Hopefully you've already viewed Module 1, Start the Year Off Right with REACH. If not, you may want to stop the session and view it now. After you complete this module, you will want to view the remaining modules, depending on which grade level you teach or which levels you'll be using. We also have additional recorded webinars for our Phonics and Newcomer programs to support implementation success. In this session, we will be taking a thorough look at the instruction in REACH levels C, D, and E for use at grades 3, 4, and 5. We'll begin by reviewing the REACH student and teacher components. Then we'll get into the unit instruction for the big questions in the unit launch. Next, we'll take a look at language, vocabulary, and reading and writing instruction in REACH and the specialized strategies for English language learners. Once we finish that, we'll take a look at the daily writing and the writing projects. Then, we'll take a detailed look at the assessment tools and reteaching options that you'll have available for each unit. And if you're using our Newcomer and Phonics programs, I'll also provide a brief overview of those resources. So let's begin with a review of the components at each level. Each student will use a student book for a majority of the instruction. They will also have access to the fiction and nonfiction leveled libraries and National Geographic Explorer books if purchased, and the MyNG Connect website, where students can access the student edition, digital library, and My Vocabulary Notebook. The engaging classroom interactives for both teachers and students include the teamwork activities that boost language and content learning in learning stations, and they have complete teacher guides located on the MyNG Connect website. The Sing With Me Language Songs Big Books that create risk-free environments for trying out new language, and the Language Builder picture cards that reinforce the vocabulary students have learned and can be used to check for understanding. Your teacher resources include the 2 teachers' editions at each level. The REACH Practice Book and Blackline Masters, which can be purchased as a consumable for each student if your district chooses, or as a Blackline Master so you can copy whatever you need for instruction. There is a different pricing option for each one, so check which option your district purchased. The REACH into Phonics kit contains integrated phonics resources that will deliver systematic and scaffolded instruction in phonemic awareness, phonics, and high-frequency words. The ExamView CD-ROM includes question banks that allow you to create your own tests. And, of course, all of the resources that are available on myngconnect.com, including an interactive teacher's edition. All right, let's review the instructional path for each unit. As a reminder, all 8 units follow the same instructional path. Each unit begins with a unit launch that builds background and sets the stage for learning. The instruction in each unit is broken down into 2 parts. Each of those 2 parts includes a main reading selection and a companion reading selection. Each unit contains explicit instruction in language, vocabulary, reading, and writing. In Part 2, students will be working on their writing project. And finally, the unit wrap-up gives students the opportunity to compare across texts and reflect upon their own reading. For this session, I'll be using Level D, Unit 7 as an example, but everything that I share will be applicable to any unit that you teach in Levels D, E, and F. If you focus on the purpose of the lesson rather than the specific content, you'll be able to easily apply what you learn to the level that you're working with. The main goals of the unit launch are to engage students and set the stage for learning by introducing the big question, which is the driving force of each unit. We begin by having students preview and predict by reading the unit title aloud and asking students what they think they will learn. The next step, introducing the big question, is essential when it comes to helping students make connections to the unit theme. Following the big question, we'll build background by having students watch a National Geographic video and share what they know about the unit theme. As you can see, the directions for Share What You Know are provided right in the student book. The final step in the unit launch is to begin the unit concept map. Students will add to this concept map throughout the unit. Each concept map is tied to the big question for the unit. Now that we've completed the unit launch, let's move on to part 1. Remember, each part will include 2 paired selections, one fiction, one nonfiction. Within each part, there are 10 days of instruction. Let's take a quick look at the Teacher's Edition planner pages to see how it's laid out. Day 1 begins with introducing academic language with instruction in the first of 2 language functions. Then, students learn the content vocabulary and a literary analysis skill. Day 2 introduces more academic language, the grammar skill, academic vocabulary, and a reading strategy. Day 3 continues to build academic language and introduces students to the second language function. Students also receive focused instruction on the reading strategy as they begin reading the selection. Reading the selection continues on Day 4 as students continue to build academic language. You can see the progression of grammar skills and vocabulary skills with the arrows as you look across the days. On Day 5, students continue to build academic language beginning with a listening and speaking lesson before moving on to applying word knowledge, rereading, and summarizing or comparing. You can see that students will also have daily writing and many opportunities to integrate content instruction throughout each day. By using our online lesson planner, you can find a plan that will fit your instructional needs no matter what the instructional time frame. We have ready-to-go plans for 20, 30, 40, 60, and 90 minutes for use in a dual language model, along with content and literacy focus plans. To learn more about the Reach Online Planner, please make a note to view the Reach Online Lesson Planner video tutorial that shows you how to create your own plans, share plans, print plans, and more. Remember, in Reach, every day begins with the language of the day. These are meant to be quick opportunities for students to talk to each other and promote and extend academic talk. You'll notice that the more students practice speaking with the language of the day, the more comfortable they will become with it, and the more language they'll produce. Now, let's dive into Day 1, where you will begin with the introduction of a language function. First, you will teach and model the language function using the language frames that are built right into the student book. In this case, our language function is how to tell an original story. Then students will practice and apply the language function using differentiated academic language frames. As you can see, this e-visual is found on myngconnect.com. After introducing the language function, it's time to introduce the content vocabulary. These will either be science or social studies vocabulary words. Every time you introduce students to new vocabulary, you'll use vocabulary routine 1. This routine follows the steps seen here: pronounce, rate, define, and elaborate. We'll take a more detailed look at this routine in a few minutes. We've provided opportunities to differentiate, like this list of Spanish cognates. Next, students will talk together about the big question. By engaging in the talk together activity, students are immersed in the words they're learning right away. Remember, students will be working with these words every day. After teaching the content vocabulary, it's time to introduce the literary analysis skill, or text structure students will be working on within the selection. Remember, building understanding of these skills before reading helps students know what to expect and how to use the text to unlock key ideas and build understanding. The lesson begins with teaching the students the skill or structure. For example, students here will be learning about imagery. This is taught using the student book and a read aloud. The read aloud is available as an e-visual through MyNG Connect. Notice the visuals used in the student book to teach imagery. This is also where you will find the first introduction to a classroom vocabulary word. These are words that are specific to classroom procedures and skill instruction. In this example, the classroom vocabulary word is category. The classroom vocabulary word is introduced to students, and then a vocabulary routine is used to extend the meaning of the word. Students will be categorizing words in this lesson and unit, so you will use this vocabulary routine to teach the meaning of the word category. To model the lesson, review the read aloud and work with students to complete the graphic organizer. Then, students will practice and apply what they've learned by talking together and using the practice book for the lesson. Opportunities for differentiation are built into the teacher's edition. Notice that with your beginners, you'll have them point to the picture labels and reread the chart headings, and with your intermediates, you will prompt questions related to the story from them. Finally, with your advanced level students, you have them add examples of imagery to their own stories, and opportunities to check student understanding of the skill or structure are also provided. And finally, as with the end of every day of the 10-day plan, we end with daily writing. The daily writing activity will vary from day to day, and it includes power writing, modeled writing, interactive writing, independent writing, and more. Here we have the power writing routine, which is located on page PD 53 in the front of your Reach Teacher's Edition. Power writing practice helps students learn to get their words down on paper and overcome the tendency to stall before starting to write. This routine is differentiated, so students will write just one word, a list of words, or a paragraph depending on their proficiency level. Teachers really like this routine. Wait until you see what your kids can write in 1 minute. At the end of each day, a close and assess reminder is also built in to wrap up the learning and assess students' understanding of the language, reading, and vocabulary lessons for that day. The writing instruction in Reach focuses on having students be able to both write and convey information. The daily writing in Reach intensifies learning for students, and it's the key to consistent growth. In Reach, teachers deliver writing lessons designed to scaffold student learning using a gradual release of responsibility. And writing routines are used consistently through Reach so that students can build on their own writing skills. Day 2 begins with the first lesson in the Grammar Skills Path. As you can see, grammar will be taught on days 2, 4, and 7, and reviewed on day 10 in each part of the unit. The Day 2 grammar lesson will be done using the Teacher's Edition and possibly an e-visual. All the grammar in Reach is contextualized, so grammar is taught within the context of a lesson. The grammar skill is taught and modeled using sentences linked to that content. The differentiation box for the grammar lessons will identify specific language transfer issues and supports for students. Once the grammar skill has been taught and modeled, it's time to practice and apply the grammar skill right away with a partner and on their own. Following the grammar lesson, it's time to teach the academic vocabulary words. These are known as delivery words because they are words that surround or are used to deliver the content. Remember, teaching these words will follow the same routine as the content vocabulary on day 1, Vocabulary Routine 1. When it's time for students to practice and apply, they will talk together in pairs to solidify their understanding of the words. You can also engage students with interactive learning tools by using the vocabulary notebook on MyNG Connect. Here students can add the key words to their online vocabulary notebook at point of use to extend their understanding and expand their vocabulary. You'll find that consistent use of the vocabulary notebook will also help students to improve their writing and better understand the content that they are learning. Now that we know what types of words you'll be teaching, let's look at the explicit, consistent, predictable routine that you will use to teach these words. Within this vocabulary routine, teachers first pronounce the word develop. We begin by having students rate themselves on their previous knowledge. They can rate whether they've seen the word before or can use it in a sentence by holding up their fingers to show how well they know the word. Next, it's time for them to explain the meaning of the word by studying the visual and using the clear, student-friendly examples provided. You'll also notice the student-friendly definitions and examples for all content and academic words are found in the back of the Reach student book and within the Teacher's Edition in the Picture Dictionary. In the fourth step, you will elaborate on the meaning of the word by generating a discussion of the word. Before reading the selection, students learn a reading strategy that helps them focus and develop the language and thinking needed to support strategic reading. The reading strategy for this unit is synthesizing. Support is provided through the use of a visual to show how to draw conclusions. Next, The strategy is modeled for students through a how-to chart right in the student book with visual cues and sentence frames. Finally, students have the opportunity to practice and apply the strategy they've learned using the differentiated academic language frames and the Talk Together practice opportunity. As you can see by the red arrows, while students are chorally reading Mount St. Helens, there are on-page supports that show them good places to draw conclusions in the reading passage. Also, on day 2, there will always be mini phonics and a fluency lesson. These lessons can be used to practice and review phonics skills that are thematically related to the content of the selection. Once the reading strategy has been taught, it's time for daily writing. One strategy you will often see is RAFT. If you're not familiar with RAFT, it's a writing strategy that enables students to write from various points of view. The letters stand for role, audience, format, and topic. Notice the beginning, intermediate, advanced, and advanced high differentiated supports built right into the daily writing activity. And again, the day ends with an opportunity to close and assess in all 3 areas: language, reading, and vocabulary. Pause the session and take a few moments to explore the instruction on days 1 and 2 and answer this question. How does this lesson support students in front-loading and scaffolding instruction? As you explore, keep your students in mind and look for specific supports that you will use. Following the language of the day, day 3 begins with the introduction of the second language function using the same explicit instruction with teach, model, practice, and apply. Notice that students are applying the new language function directly to what they did with the first language function on day 1. Students will expand their word knowledge, which is in the vocabulary skills trace for the unit. This time you will use vocabulary routine 2 to create a graphic organizer, illustration, or writing piece to expand students' knowledge of the meaning and usage of the words. Differentiated support is also offered to support newcomers during this lesson through the use of picture cards. Now it's time to begin reading the first selection, which always begins with a preview. Each preview will follow the same 3 steps. First, introduce the selection by sharing the title, An Island Grows, asking students to predict what will happen, and encouraging them to use keywords to describe what they see. Then introduce the students to the genre of the selection and one of the aspects of that genre. For example, here students are working with a narrative poem, so they need to know something about the elements of poetry, including rhythm and rhyme. This information is always presented to the students in their student books, and an example is provided. Finally, you will preview and build background using the say and do sheltering strategies as you conduct a picture walk. Pause the session and take a few moments to explore the instruction provided for any reading selection. As you explore, try to identify student supports and teacher supports. When you have finished exploring, click play to resume the session. Now that you've had a chance to explore a reading selection, let's look at a few student supports I hope you noticed. Within Reach, you'll find there are built-in opportunities to set a purpose for reading with the fiction selections. And with the non-fiction selections, there are opportunities to connect across texts and introduce the genre. You'll also find both content and academic key vocabulary words highlighted. Notice In Other Words, which is an on-page glossary of words, phrases, and idioms. Words are restated so that students can replace the text with the support found below, and the meaning of the text will still be the same. Students will also have frequent opportunities to monitor comprehension as they read before you move on. Now, let's look at the teacher supports. As you read through the selection with the students, you will gradually release the responsibility to them as they work on building comprehension with both the literary analysis skill they've learned on day 1, imagery, and the reading strategy, draw conclusions, students learned on day 2. As you can see here, Reach also provides support through different reading options for below-level, on-level, and above-level students. Let's take a look at how one teacher, Ms. Gomez, uses these reading options to work with her 3 levels of students. She will use key points reading with her below-level readers to have them track print while she reads aloud to them, so they can begin to acquire print knowledge. While Ms. Gomez is working with one of her groups, here are some things her other students could be doing. First, she groups her students based on their reading levels. Ms. Gomez has some of her students working in their practice book, and at the same time, she has other students listening to the MP3 of the reading selection and reading along. This is also a great time for her students to use the language and literacy and cross-curricular teamwork activities that are connected to the content in each unit. And another group uses the student resources located on MyNG Connect during this time. Next, Ms. Gomez works with the on-level students on guided reading, while her below-level students work on myngconnect.com or within their practice book. Ms. Gomez uses the guided reading routine located at the front of her Teacher's Edition on page PD 47 to support students before, during, and after the reading. Following this, she has her above-level students reading each section independently and discuss the meaning as she asks them the build comprehension questions. Day 3 ends with a modeled writing lesson writing routine found on PD 54, and you will wrap the instructional day up with a close and assess. Now that we've introduced and begun to build students' academic language, Day 4 begins with the next step of the grammar skills trace. As you can see, you will continue to work with students on the same grammar skill they learned on Day 2. You will expand on the grammar skill you taught on Day 2 through teach and model. Next, in practice and apply, students will get an opportunity to work with a partner and apply the new skill using their practice book. On Day 4, you will use vocabulary routine number 3 to share students' knowledge about the word for which they have become class experts. Students will then get the chance to extend that sharing through a cooperative learning routine supporting academic talk. And notice this time you will check understanding of the lesson using one of the Language Builder picture cards, where students will have the opportunity to use the key words they've learned while talking about the picture. As I just mentioned, students will share their new word knowledge through cooperative learning routines. The routines will vary throughout the program, but pages PD 58 and PD 59 include a comprehensive list of all of the routines that you will cover. On Day 4, you will still be reading the selection, but when that's complete, students have the opportunity to think about and respond to the selection. Notice step number 2 in the Talk About It section also has students applying the language function they first learned on Day 1. You can see how tightly scaffolded REACH is to promote student success. Step 2 in the Think and Respond lesson, Test-Taking Strategies, provides detailed instruction for teaching students a strategy they can use when they take any type of test. Notice you will be using an e-visual to deliver this instruction. This same strategy will be studied in Part 1 and Part 2, and additional test question examples are provided on the actual e-visual. Day 4's daily writing also uses modeled writing routines, but this time the writing assignment is built right into the student book in the Write About It section of the Think and Respond page. Now that we've walked through instruction on days 1 through 4, pause the session and take a few moments to look at the instruction for days 5 through 7. What's new or different on these pages than in the first 4 days of instruction? Okay, you probably saw a lot of similarities in the instruction for days 5 through 7. Now let's look at what's new. On Day 5, you will continue to focus on listening and speaking skills, just like you did on Day 3, by teaching and modeling the skill, except now you will practice and apply the listening and speaking skill, how to stay on topic, by teaching students how to self-monitor and self-correct using the How to Learn Language strategy. Summarizing. On Day 5, this is also the first time students will be rereading and retelling the story. Each student will retell the events from the reading selection to a partner, and then they will reverse roles and repeat. As you can see here, you will use the Retelling a Story rubric to assess students' ability to retell the story. Notice that this rubric is differentiated for beginning, intermediate, advanced, and advanced high students. Day 6 is the beginning of the companion selection instruction, but this time we begin by connecting the text we are about to read to the text we've already read in the main selection. Then we introduce the genre, and preview and build background just like we did with the main selection. And as you read, scaffolded instruction for building comprehension is provided again. Notice that this time, however, we are reteaching and applying the reading strategy. Students will also reread the main selection and compare it to the companion selection. On day 7, students will be working on the grammar skill, but now they will be using their student book, gradually releasing responsibility to students for this skill. Students will also reread the companion selection with a specific focus on important details, and do their daily writing, which again is modeled writing, but this time they'll be using a think aloud to plan and write. Now, days 8 and 9 are a little different. Students will work on either a theme theater using the main selection, or they will work on an oral language project or report. This is a time for your students to shine and show you what they've really learned. You can even videotape your students performing the activities and have them watch and assess themselves afterwards. It's sure to be a big hit and a great chance to assess the language function by using the oral language project rubric located in the assessment handbook. On days 8 and 9, you'll also have the opportunity to provide differentiated reading options using the guided reading routine and leveled books if purchased. The great part about these is that the work has been done for you. All of these leveled books are linked to the content covered in the unit, so there's no need to look for additional books. There's even a leveled book finder located on myngconnect.com that you can use to link books that you might already have at your school. Remember, there are 6 leveled books per part, 3 fiction and 3 nonfiction. You'll also have the National Geographic Explorer books where students will study the same content, but each book is written at different levels. These books contain exclusive National Geographic content and are paired to the reading selections in Reach. Both the leveled books and the Explorer books are flexible to fit into any instructional model. For all of the leveled readers, key vocabulary words have been selected, and this is where students extend their vocabulary as seen in the vocabulary skills trace. Don't forget, there are lesson plans for each book. You can download them on myngconnect.com. You can learn how to access these with the Getting Started with MyNG Connect tutorial. These lessons are a wonderful resource and they connect back to the big idea. They're differentiated to encourage students to share and compare, and they relate back to what students have learned with the grammar skill. On day 10, it's time to review and assess student learning through interactive review activities that reinforce the concepts covered in Part 1. The people icons represent how you should administer the review, in pairs, in a group, in a team, or individually. Notice there are 2 areas where you will assess the students using the assessment handbook. Now let's take a look at those areas. The first area you will test students on is the language function. You can use these rubrics with the language function activity in order to assess students' understanding. The second area you will assess students on is vocabulary. The keywords test will check students' understanding of all keywords covered in this part, both content and academic. Now take a moment to pause this presentation and consider how Reach prepares English language learners for academic success. When you have finished, click play to resume the session. After day 10, it's time to move on to Part 2. The instruction in Part 2 is the same as Part 1, but the one main difference is that this part includes the writing project. Let's look at this a little closer. In Part 2, your daily writing will always include the writing project. As you can see, the teacher's edition will tell you which step you're on in the writing project and which pages you need to go to for that instruction. Notice how tightly connected the writing projects in Reach are to the reading. For example, students will be writing a report about forces of nature that change the earth, which connects to the big idea. What forces can change Earth? As you can see, each grade level of Reach has 8 writing projects, and each writing project will focus on one writing mode and form. Take a moment to look at the projects for levels D, E, and F, and notice the progression of skills. In Level D, students will cover modes and forms from personal narrative. In Level E, they will likewise cover 8 modes and forms. And finally, in Level F, students will reinforce and expand on some of the previous modes and forms while also delving into new writing modes, all linked to grade level English language arts and reading standards. As I mentioned, each writing project in REACH focuses on a specific mode and form and includes an e-visual checklist up front to help students clearly unlock what needs to be included in this mode and form of writing. Each writing project also hones in on one of the traits of good writing for more focused instruction. Although students are held accountable for all traits of writing when they are assessed, the writing trait for this unit is organization. In addition to focusing on this trait, classroom vocabulary instruction is included to ensure that students understand the meaning of each trait so they can transfer what that means to their own writing. Each writing project also maps out the lesson overview and suggested pacing for all steps of the writing process. Remember, the writing project is not meant to be taught at the end of a unit, even though that's where it's found in the teacher's edition. It will be referenced as part of the daily writing lesson in Part 2 of each unit. The REACH writing rubric will be used to score each student's projects on all traits, but as you can see on this rubric, the focus for instruction in this unit is organization. Now let's take a closer look at the writing project itself. You will begin the writing project by analyzing the prompt using the RAF strategy that we talked about earlier and discussing who the intended audience is. Then you'll have students study the writing model and focus on the features of that mode using a checklist. Next, you will teach the trait and model how the trait is broken down in the student book in order to make the parts accessible to students. And you will present students with a writing rubric. Afterwards, students will work with partners to discuss how to score writing using the rubric from the practice book. Notice that the academic language frames allow all students to participate in this activity. Next, you will begin the pre-writing process by choosing a topic, listing your research questions, and creating a research plan. Students will then have the opportunity to gather information about the topic they've chosen by identifying their sources, creating source cards, which are used to help students keep track of their sources, and making note cards, where students can trap important words, phrases, and ideas that they find as they research. The next step before students begin writing is the first draft to get organized, modeling how students can arrange their note cards in a logical order, followed by how to organize the information in their report so that there's a clear structure. Here, students will use their practice book to create a graphic organizer that will help them to organize the main ideas and details of their report. Now it's time for students to begin their first draft. You will introduce drafting using the writing routine located on PD 54. Notice the say and do directions and suggestions built right into your teacher's edition for you to use as you model. Next, students will begin writing the draft. You'll notice in the student book that students are asked to have the graphic organizers they created out to guide them as they write on their draft. And you will again use multi-level strategies in order to support all learners. Once students have finished drafting, it's time for them to revise their drafts. First, you will review the trait with students using the practice book. Then you will project the e-visual found on MyNG Connect to model for students how to conduct a peer conference. Students will then read their draft to a partner and talk with each other about ways to improve. The next step of the revision process will be for students to make changes to a sample paragraph from a research paper using the revising marks they learned. And if they need additional practice on these marks, you can refer them to their practice book. Then you will ask students to make revisions to their own drafts using the revising marks and the rubric and notes from their peer conference. Revision is an important skill covered on many state writing tests, and REACH prepares ELL students for success. Once students have completed the revisions of their content, it's time to edit and proofread. Students go through the process of editing for grammar, spelling, and mechanics. Built right into the teacher's edition is an opportunity for students to have additional practice reviewing the grammar skill using the practice book. Next, students have the opportunity to practice these editing and proofreading skills with a partner and share their writing through a variety of multimedia options. This can be done in partners, teams, or individually, and they're differentiated by proficiency level. Now that we've completed the unit launch, Part 1 and Part 2, it's time for the unit wrap-up. The unit wrap-up begins with a talk-together opportunity that brings students back to the big question and their completed concept map. It continues with an opportunity for students to share their ideas about the big question and tie what they've learned back to the beginning of the unit, all promoting academic talk. Notice the differentiation icons reflect the range of levels for each presentation option. The presentation options for beginning and intermediate level students offers more pictorial support, the opportunity for students to express themselves kinesthetically. Now it's time to assess your students on what they've learned. Now, we all know assessment is critical to instruction and academic success, which is why REACH has a comprehensive assessment plan. REACH provides many opportunities to check for understanding, assess, and identify how to close gaps. There are many assessment tools and rubrics in REACH that will give you ongoing monitoring of your students' progress. First, there are part assessments that were mentioned during Day 10 instruction, and they're shown here. You'll remember we looked at examples of the language function, the oral language rubric, and the vocabulary assessments. Additionally, the reading strategy assessment is very similar to the other assessments. These part tests are a critical part of the assessment process in REACH and can be used as an early indicator that reteaching may be necessary. Next, there are 3 unit tests that students take at the end of each unit. They are reading, writing, and grammar. Let's take a look at these a little closer. When it comes to the unit tests in REACH, you can test the way you teach. Multi-level strategies are used while teaching, and the same occurs when it comes to the assessment on the unit tests for reading, writing, and grammar. These tests are designed to be rigorous and thereby familiarize students with state test formats, track student progress, and provide prescriptions for reteaching. Here's an example from an intermediate and a beginning level test. Notice that the lower the language proficiency, the more pictorial support that's provided. You can see on these reading unit tests that the beginning, intermediate, advanced, and advanced high levels are indicated at the top of each test form in the assessment handbook. So don't be alarmed when you open your assessment handbook and see how many pages there are. All of the differentiation has been done for you to save you time and ensure your student success. Once you've assessed students using the reading, grammar, and writing unit assessments, you can use the answer key in the back of the assessment handbook to score the tests and enter the information into the student profile sheet like you see here. Then use the class profile to determine if students need reteaching. If a student doesn't master a specific reporting category, reteaching is necessary. You may want to use different colored highlighters or markers to help you easily see which students need reteaching in which reporting category. Using the sample class profile on the right, we can see that 2 students in this class, Jorge and Liz, need reteaching in using compound words. And if your school district has purchased e-assessment, all of this has been done for you automatically once the student answer sheets have been scanned in or they complete their selection test online. Be sure to check back for On-Demand Module 6, e-assessment, to learn how to access these reports. Okay, I've mentioned reteaching a few times now, so let me show you where you can find the reteaching lessons that are already developed for you on MyNG Connect. These reteaching resources are available in the resource directory. Once you click on the link for the appropriate reteaching lesson, you then click on the download button to open the reteaching options and save them to your desktop or print them out for later use. Here you see a sample reteaching lessons for key vocabulary. The first page of the document includes the instructional path for reteaching the key vocabulary. The next page contains the activities you can assign for practice. Notice that these activities are already differentiated by language proficiency for you. Each of these activities is a different way for students to practice the material that they have learned. To reteach comprehension, you can use the leveled library lesson plans located on MyNG Connect that I shared with you earlier in our session today. For more detailed directions on how to access these resources, be sure to view the MyNG Connect videos available on the On-Demand website. Take a moment to think about how you will use the reteaching lessons in your classroom. Let's think back to our teacher, Ms. Gomez, who implements her reteaching lessons in a variety of ways. Sometimes she uses reteaching lessons during her small group instruction. Once a week, she works with the other teachers on the team and they divide up the students based on their reteaching needs. They also have student work on the reteaching lessons during their after-school tutorial sessions. Another powerful tool that's available to you is the ExamView CD-ROM. This CD-ROM includes question banks for all part and unit tests with editing capability. There is also a test wizard to create your own tests and multiple versions of the same test, and it allows you to print tests and answer sheets. In addition to testing resources, there are Phonics resources and Newcomer resources that are aligned to the instruction in REACH. Let's take a quick look at REACH into Phonics. REACH into Phonics builds phonemic awareness, phonics, decoding, and spelling skills with highly interactive materials. The instructional path includes the introduction and teaching of high-frequency words, phonics skills, and then students have an opportunity to apply what they've learned in a variety of ways. Be sure to watch the REACH into Phonics overview available on the On-Demand Modules website to learn more. Now let's take a look at the newcomer support in the USA that can be used with REACH. Here's a quick look at the lesson flow. In the USA helps newcomers develop language, survival vocabulary, and the basic building blocks of literacy for newly arrived and pre-literate students. There are 10 units in the USA, and they all follow the same instructional path. Each unit begins with a unit launch. Then you move on to parts 1, 2, and 3. And after part 3, there's always a writing and progress monitoring. The instructional path for parts 1, 2, and 3 are always the same. Be sure to watch the In the USA overview available on the On-Demand Modules website to learn more about the support for newcomers. Congratulations! You've almost completed the 4th On-Demand module for REACH. In this session, we took a detailed look at the REACH student and teacher components, and we walked through the big questions in the unit launch. Then we took a detailed look at the language, vocabulary, reading and writing instruction in REACH, and the specialized strategies. Next, we took a detailed look at the assessment tools and reteaching options available for each unit. And finally, I shared a brief overview of our Newcomer and Phonics programs. For a more detailed look at these two programs, be sure to view the recorded webinars available on the On-Demand Module website. Before you attend the next REACH On-Demand module, first study. Use your assessment handbook to find the assessment tools that work best for you, your school, and your district. Secondly, schedule. Take out your calendar and schedule time to view the REACH On-Demand training modules for your grade level. And lastly, please complete the evaluation on the next slide. We really value your feedback. Thank you for your feedback. Don't forget to check the Downloads tab on the left side of the screen for your certificate of completion and check back soon for your next module.